And greetings, saints of the Most High. Welcome to another installment of the Messianic Torah Observer. Rod Thomas coming to you on a beautiful spring preparation day here in the DFW. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to fellowship with me. And as always, beloved, it is my hope, trust, and prayer that this installment of TMTO finds you, your families, and your fellowships well and blessed. As I am publishing this teaching, it is Preparation Day, the 13th day of the 12th month on Yah's sacred calendar year, which translates to Friday, March 14, 2025, which means that we are inching ever so closely to biblical Rosh Hashanah, and that's presuming all of the observational elements of Yah's calendar fall into their proper order. And so we are near the end of this month, or at least halfway. And as we get there, we'll keep you apprised of the outcome of the barley crop and new moon searches in the land of Yisrael and make the appropriate announcements. And for those of you who have or who will celebrate Purim, I pray it was or will be a meaningful time of reflection and family and fellowship time together. Well, as you may be able to tell, I'm a bit under the weather this week. My voice is just about gone. I'm going to try to squeeze this out. I seem to have all the typical symptoms of a springtime flu or cold or whatever. So forgive me if my voice and lack of energy are distractions to you. Nevertheless, I didn't want to leave you without a little something for your Sabbath this week. So I decided to share with you my response to a beloved brother's question to me this past week that I think may be of benefit for all of us. His question was, what are the keys to the kingdom? What did Yeshua mean by keys of the kingdom, keys to the kingdom? And what role does commandment or Torah or mitzvot keeping play in these keys? The phrase keys of the kingdom or keys to the kingdom is found amid Yeshua's response to Peter's confession and profession of who his master Yeshua is. It's found in Matthew chapter 16. We're going to read verses 13 through 20. And the Lexham English Bibles reads as follows. Verse 13. Now, when Yeshua came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he began asking his disciples, saying, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" Verse 14, and they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Verse 15, he, Yeshua, said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Verse 16, and Simon Peter, Shimon Kepha, answered and said, "You are the Christ, you are the Mashiach, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, the Son of the living Elohim." Verse 17, and Yeshua answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, Simon Bar Yonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Verse 18, and I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, or Gehenna, will not overpower it. Verse 19, I will give you, and this is the crux of our talk today. Verse 19, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you release on earth will be released in heaven. Verse 20, then he commanded the disciples that they should tell no one that he was the Christ, that he was the Messiah. Before delving into just what these elusive, mysterious keys to the kingdom Yeshua speaks of, we must first frame all of this in proper biblical context. You know me, context, context, context. In verse 13, we read that Yeshua and his taught ones had arrived in the region of Caesarea, aka Philippi. Seems the group had actually stopped at the base of Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon, as you may or may not know, was a location of extensive idol and pagan worship. That is primarily the worship of Pan that comes readily to mind. And if one were to think about our focus passage of Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20, with the backdrop of Mount Hermon in mind, you would come to the same conclusion as I have, that the Master could not have picked a better place for the declarations and pronouncements that were to be made about him and about his ministry to all creation, to include not just all of humanity, but also the spirit world. Always think about how such pronouncements impact the spiritual world. So, the Master asked his taught ones who people thought he was. His sent ones responded with a number of named individuals that were attributed to him. And then the Master drills down even further and asks his sent ones who they think he is. Peter, his name being Shimon bar Yonah, Simon bar Jonah, pipes up with the profound response, "You are the Mashiach, the Son of the living Allah, who has come into the Olam Hazeh, that is, who has come into the world. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God, who has come into the world." That's chapter 16, verse 16. The Master affirms Shimon's declaration by calling him blessed, verse 18. And he declares Shimon, or Simon, blessed because Simon's declaration came by way of the revelation of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, verse 17. And so from this point in this historic interaction between Yeshua and his sent ones, things start to get a little murky. Murky in that millions of people have been misled by their religious leaders over millennia because their religious leaders have intentionally, and to some degree unintentionally, misinterpreted the following two verses. We read in verse 18 that because of Shimon, or Simon's Holy Spirit-induced pronouncement of the Master's true identity, that he is the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim, Yehoshua gives Shimon, he gives Simon the moniker or the nickname Kepha, meaning stone or rock. Yeshua's application of the title or name Kepha to Shimon was the launch word upon which to describe the rest of his earthly ministry and the ministry that his taught ones would soon enter. The Master tells not only Shimon Kepha, but the rest of his taught ones that upon that rock he would build or establish his kahila, aka his ecclesia as opposed to church, that the gates of Gehenna, or the gates of Hades, or the gates of hell, would be incapable of resisting over or overcoming, verse 18. And then the Master tells his taught ones he would give them the keys to the Malkut HaShamayim, that is the kingdom of the heavens, verse 19. The age-old point of contention here is, did Yeshua build his kahila, his ecclesia? We're not going to be using the word church because it's not a good word to be used. But did Yeshua build his kahila, his ecclesia, upon the person of Shimon Kepha, or Simon Peter? And did Simon Peter, or Shimon Kepha, alone receive the keys to the kingdom from Yeshua HaMashiach? Clearly, Yeshua's declaration that upon this rock he would build his ecclesia, or his kahila, had absolutely nothing to do with the person and future ministry of Simon Peter, or Shimon Kepha. A careful contextual read of the text will reveal that the Master declared that upon the bedrock of truth that came out of Simon Peter's mouth, that being that Yeshua was Messiah, the Son of the living God, the Son of the living Eloha, who has come into the Olam Hazeh, the world. This declaration, unfortunately, has been twisted, has been misinterpreted by various religious leaders throughout the world who asserted throughout millennia that the Master was building his church, upon the person and upon the ministry of Simon Peter, which is patently false. Patently false. The next travesty is the misapplication of the Master's promise that he would give to an individual, or give to individuals, plural, the keys to the Malkut Ha-Shamayim, or the kingdom of the heavens. Again, millions have been misled into believing that the Master was handing the keys of the kingdom specifically to Simon, or Shimon Kepha, or Simon Peter. Now, some English translators have inserted the term and, A-N-D, and at the very start of verse 19, so that it reads, and I will give you the keys to the kingdom of the heavens. Now, this insertion naturally leads most readers to link the Master's response to Simon Peter's Holy Spirit-induced declaration that he, Yehoshua, was indeed the Messiah, the Son of the living Eloha, the Son of the living God, to Peter, exclusively receiving the keys to the kingdom, the keys to the Malchut. This simple connector and added to verse 19, and the misinterpreted Peter being the rock upon which Yeshua would build his ecclesia, or his kahila, places a tremendous amount of authority and precedence upon the person of Simon Peter, or Shimon Kepha. And this forced, error-ridden interpretation of these two verses formed the felonious doctrine of Peter alone possessing the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and that he was the person upon whom the church, the ecclesia, the kahila would be built. This doctrine and understanding are patently false. It forms the basis of the Catholic Church's false teaching and doctrine that Peter was the first pope, the so-called vicar of Christ, and that all succeeding men who have laid claim to that demonically inspired office and title are spiritual descendants of Peter. That they are the vicar of Christ. So, just to be clear, Yeshua's words were meant for all of his disciples, all of his taught ones, not just to Simon Peter, not to just Simon or Shimon Kepha. Now, getting to the main question of this post, what did Yeshua mean by giving his disciples, or his taught ones, the keys of the kingdom of the heavens? It's no secret that keys are instruments used to do what? They lock and unlock doors, gates, and other secure barriers and instruments. And this concept is no different from the concept of keys in Yeshua's day. Yeshua's use of the term keys of the kingdom of heaven implies that the kingdom of heaven was not open or accessible to just anyone. There is a direct link to the Master's statement to his taught ones that the gates of Hades, or the gates of Gehenna, would not withstand his kahila, his ecclesia. You see, the holder or keeper of keys, let's say keys to a gate like the gates of hell, or the gates of Hades, or the gates of Gehenna, had tremendous power. This individual, this holder of the keys, would have the power and authority to deny entry into their city or region or keep, or to allow entry into their city, region, or keep. You can let them in, or you can deny. The holder of the keys to a place or thing then served as a protector of that locked or secure thing or place. And this individual had the responsibility of keeping unauthorized individuals out of the city, region, or keep. Remember, Adam possessed the keys to the garden or Gan Eden. He was tasked by Father with keeping entities out who didn't belong there in the garden, as well as permitting those who had valid business entry into the garden. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. It reads, "And Jehovah Elohim took the man and put him into Gan Eden to work it and to guard Shamra it, Shamra it. But as we all know, Adam failed in his gatekeeping role by allowing the Nakash, the serpent, into the garden, and we all know how that story ended up. Conversely, the holder of the keys of a city or gate or keep also possesses the wherewithal. Let's just sum it up and say authority to permit authorized individuals the freedom of coming and going, of having access to the secure place. So then, what do keys have to do with the kingdom of the heavens, the Malkut HaShamayim? The kingdom, or Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens, exists in the here and now, that being the kingdom that is already but not yet. It is the kingdom that resides within every true disciple of Yeshua Messiah. Matthew chapter 12, verse 28. As well as it is the coming reality of Yah's kingdom in the world tomorrow. Quite simply, beloved, the biblical concept and reality of the Malkut Elohim, the kingdom of Yah, is the uncompromising rule of Jehovah over his chosen ones. It's Yah's rule over every aspect of our lives, each and every day that we breathe air in this life, as well as it is Yah's rule through the person of Yeshua Messiah over the nation peoples of this world in the millennium kingdom age. Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. This being said, beloved, someone has to have the keys to these forms of the kingdom, right? Someone has to possess the authority to keep out those who don't belong or who don't qualify to be in the kingdom, as well as to grant access to those who Yah has chosen to enter his glorious kingdom. And this is the point of Yeshua's words to his taught ones, whereby he promised to give them the keys of the Malkut Shamayim, the kingdom of the heavens. Indeed, Yeshua was promising to grant his taught ones and his sent ones the authority to permit and to deny entry into the kingdom of Yah. Consider the following in Matthew chapter 19. We're going to start at verse 27. And the RSTNE reads, "Then answered Kepha, Peter, and said to him being Yeshua, see, we," that is Kepha and the rest of the disciples, "see, we have forsaken all and followed you. What shall we have, therefore?" In other words, what is the plan for us, given that we've given up everything in our lives to follow you, Yeshua? Verse 28, and Yehoshua said to them, "Truly I say to you, those of you who have followed me in the regeneration when the Ben Adam, that is the Son of Man, shall sit on the kiseh, that is the seat of authority, as we discussed in a previous installment of TMTO, of his esteem. That is, let me read that again so it could be clear. Truly I say to you, those of you who have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit on the kisei of his esteem, you shall also sit upon 12 thrones, administering mishpat, that is, judgment over the 12 tribes of Yasharel, over Yisrael. Again, that was Matthew 19, verses 27 through 28. So when we speak about the keys of the Malkut, the kingdom of Yah, we're clearly talking about the authority that will be granted to certain individuals in terms of accessing and being denied access to the kingdom of Yah. And it's difficult to come to a complete understanding of what that authority looks like without a study of the remainder of the passage, where the master declares that whatever they bind or loose on earth will be established in heaven. But I want to keep this discussion as simple and as brief as possible, and my voice may not hold out to go that far, so Abba willing, we'll get into the details of what that binding and loosing looks like in a future installment of TMTO. But let's try to bring this home a little bit. What Yeshua was declaring and informing his disciples, his sent ones, was that they would receive authority. They would receive authority that would establish the criteria necessary to make it into the kingdom of Elohim, the kingdom of Yah. The Hebrew understanding of keys to the kingdom is one where the Jewish religious leaders, that being the scribes and Pharisees, who possessed the knowledge and understanding of what it took to be a member of the kingdom of Jehovah, true Israel. However, their self-indulgence, their hypocrisy, according to Yeshua, shut folks out of the Malkut Elohim, out of the kingdom of Yah. Matthew chapter 23, verse 13. So we're talking about privileged knowledge that was entrusted to the most disciplined and zealous of the religious leaders. But they had to also be righteous. And because the Jewish religious leaders abused the authority, they abused the trust Jehovah instilled in them, Yehoshua informed them that the keys of the kingdom, that authority they once held, would be given to another people. Matthew chapter 21, verse 43. Yeshua says, therefore I say to you, he's speaking to the Jewish religious leaders, that the Malkut of Jehovah, the kingdom of Jehovah, shall be taken from you and given to a people bringing forth the fruits of it. And those people would, of course, be Yehoshua's taught and sent ones, his Talmudim, his disciples, and by extension, the keys of the kingdom, or the Malkut, and the authority therein would be given to all who are of the true faith once delivered by these, the Talmudim, the apostles. And because Yeshua was stripping the keys of the kingdom of Jehovah away from the Jewish religious leaders of his day and passing them on to his taught and sent ones, well, the forgotten ones of Jewish society would have the privilege of receiving and entering the kingdom, or the Malkut. Matthew chapter 21. We'll be looking at verse 31 and 32. And the RST&E reads, truly I say to you. This is Yeshua speaking to the religious leaders, that the tax collectors and the harlots go into the Malkut of Jehovah, the kingdom of Jehovah, before you. Verse 32. For Yochanan, John the immerser, came to you in the way of Zedekiah, the way of righteousness, and you believed him not. But the tax collectors and the harlots believed him. And you, when you had seen it, made no teshuvah, that is, you did not repent afterwards, that you might believe him. The gates to the kingdom had been closed to all but a remnant of Hebrews up to Yeshua's day. Matthew chapter 23, verse 13. But woe to you, Sophim, you scribes, and Prushim, you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens, from men. You neither go in yourselves, neither do you allow them that are entering to go in. But now, Yeshua's taught ones, soon to be sent ones, would open up the gates to the glorious kingdom of Yah to those willing to receive and accept Yah's invitation to receive and be under the rule of Yehovah through Yeshua Messiah. The keys or access to the Malkut Elohim, the kingdom of Yah that Yeshua is referencing here, to his taught ones is privileged halakhic knowledge. When I say privileged halakhic knowledge, I'm talking about the ways of Yah that are known primarily to just the learned ones, such as the scribes and Pharisees. They should know it. Matthew chapter 13, verses 16 and 17. Now that privileged knowledge, that privileged halakhic knowledge is the fullness of the gospel of the kingdom. Yeshua's taught ones were being given the spiritual tools to properly interpret and teach Torah and to make decisions on behalf of Yah's chosen ones. And these would have been the keys held by the scribes and Pharisees in relation to their teaching and example function over Israel. And these teachers of Torah served, in a sense, as the gatekeepers for humanity. However, these religious leaders squandered the authority. They squandered the privilege given to them by Yehovah. So they lost it. Yeshua took it away from them. But Yeshua's taught ones would receive the full understanding of Yah's plan of salvation, restoration, and redemption, and given the keys of the Malkut Elohim, the kingdom of Yah, the kingdom of the heavens. Thus, Yeshua's Talmudim, his disciples, would take that which they'd received from their master and establish Yeshua's Kehillah, his assembly, his ecclesia, which would be founded upon the rock, that rock being Yehoshua, the son of the living Elohim. The Talmudim dispensed to all who would be called of Yehovah the halakha, the way that would take the true believer and the member of the true faith once delivered from Pesach to Sukkot, from Passover to the Feast of Tabernacles. Their testimony and their teachings firmly established the halakha that was passed down to them by Master Yeshua. And the halakha, the way of the Talmudim, being the same halakha of Yeshua Messiah. Matthew chapter 11, verse 29, Yeshua said to his disciples, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." That halakha is none other than Torah, Yah's loving instructions in righteousness. But many will question the reality of this, the reality that Yeshua came to teach Torah. But the reality, beloved, is that everything Yeshua modeled and taught his Talmudim, his disciples, and by extension us today, was Torah. Yeshua declared to his taught ones, and this is recorded in Matthew 5. We'll be looking at verse 17 through 20. Yeshua said, "Think not that I am come to weaken or to destroy the Torah or the Nevi'im," that being the prophets. "I have not come to weaken or destroy, but to completely reveal it in its intended fullness and to confirm it." Verse 18, "For truly I say to you, until the current Shamayim, the current heavens and earth pass away, not one word shall by any means pass away from the Torah until all be fulfilled." Verse 19, "Whoever therefore shall break or weaken one of the least Torah mitzvot, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens. But whoever shall do and teach the commands, the same shall be called great in the Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens. Verse 20, for I say to you, except your Zedekah, your righteousness, shall exceed the Zedekah, or the righteousness of the Sophrim, that being the scribes, and the Prushim, that being the Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens. You see, Yeshua is the walking, talking Torah, and his example and teachings constitute the ground or house rules for the kingdom. Remember, everywhere Yeshua taught, he taught about the kingdom being like. The kingdom is like. The kingdom is like. Laying out the ground rules. Yeshua taught the rules of the kingdom to all with a heart to receive his truth, eyes to see the truth, ears to hear the truth. And it fell to his disciples, Yeshua's Talmudim, to take those principles and to teach others what it takes to receive and enter the kingdom. And they held the keys to the kingdom. And all who are called into leadership in the body of Mashiach, the body of Messiah today, have been given those same keys to the kingdom. I believe that the greatest insight into Yeshua's keys to the kingdom are in the Beatitudes and in the kingdom principles outlined by our Master in Matthew chapters 5 through 7. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5, and let's look at the Beatitudes, verses 1 through 12. It's pretty quick. Let's start at verse 2. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 2, starting out, says, and opening his mouth, he began to teach them, saying, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 4, blessed are the ones who mourn, because they will be comforted. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, because they will inherit the earth. Verse 6, blessed are the ones who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they will be satisfied. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, because they will be shown mercy. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, because they will see Yehovah. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called, Bene Yehovah, sons of Yah, sons of God. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 11, blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil things against you, lying on account of me. Verse 12, rejoice and be glad, because your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets before you. And the following 2.5 chapters expound upon these essential keys, these principles, and they teach us how Yeshua understood Torah and how his taught ones would be expected to keep them and teach their followers. You see, unless we adopt these attitudes, we will in no wise receive the kingdom. Luke chapter 18, verse 17. For within these 3 chapters of Matthew, we find the foundation or the master's keys to his taught ones and sent ones receiving and entering the kingdom. He emphasized in Matthew chapter 6, verses 32 and 33, seek first the kingdom of Yehovah and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Yeshua was emphasizing that under his yoke, and yoke is his halakha, his ways of life, his understanding of Torah. Under his yoke, his disciples seek after the things of Yah's kingdom by applying the principles of the previously mentioned Beatitudes. And his disciples seek Yah's righteousness by keeping and walking out Yah's instructions in righteousness, Yah's Torah. So how do we connect the keys of the Malkut HaShamayim, the kingdom of the heavens, to the commandments, the mitzvot, or the Torah? The Beatitudes are Yah's mitzvah, or mitzvot, his instructions, broken down into spiritual applications. Yeshua modeled these instructions, these principles for us, and we are to imitate them. Keeping Yah's mitzvot, his commandments, his instructions without Yeshua's example guiding and leading us accomplishes nothing. Amid these beatitudes, these instructions, these principles, Yeshua declared he did not come to destroy Yah's Torah, but to completely reveal it in its intended fullness and to confirm it. Matthew 5, verse 17. Jewish tradition claims that there are 613 mitzvot, or commandments. And many people within and without our faith debate the validity of that number. I'm one of them. Nevertheless, some will inevitably conclude that Yeshua mentioned only a few commandments in his teachings, which are true. But the point as it relates to the keys to the kingdom is, how do we walk out those commandments, those Torah instructions in righteousness? How do we walk out those kingdom rules? What attitude, what heart, what mind do we keep those commandments, those instructions in righteousness? Because Yeshua wanted his taught ones to recognize that it's one thing to go through the motions of keeping each Torah commandment, but it's how to walk out those commandments in accordance to Yeshua's standards. That's the winner chicken dinner of it all. It's what it's all about. Yeshua gave a very tall order to his disciples, his taught ones. In giving them the keys of the kingdom, he was authorizing them to establish the proper halakha that would take members of the true faith once delivered, Jude 3, from Passover to Tabernacles, from Pesach to Sukkot. That is, from the member receiving and believing in the person and ministry of Yeshua, receiving the atonement for their sins, all the way up to growing in grace through the sanctification process, fueled by the Holy Spirit, and then receiving and entering the Malkut Elohim. Yeshua's apostles were given the authority to interpret Yeshua's teachings of the gospel of the kingdom, and then to teach members of the true faith what was needed for them to receive and enter the kingdom. You see, it's easy to get completely focused on keeping the commandments. Most of us, when we come into this faith, that's what we do. We consternate, we dwell so much on commandment keeping. Many of us never make it out of the base of Mount Sinai. We're still stuck there. All our walk with Messiah, all the time that we are walking with Messiah, we never leave Mount Sinai, but it's time to come from under Mount Sinai. Yeshua came to show us that there is much more to commandment keeping than simply doing them. Matthew chapter 23, verse 23. He said to the scribes and Pharisees, "Hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done." In other words, yes, you're supposed to tithe. You're supposed to keep the commandments. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. In other words, yes, tithe, yes, but within the paradigm of tithing, within the paradigm of commandment keeping, also focus on the weightier matters of Torah: judgment, mercy, faith. That's the challenge that faces us. That is one of the essential keys to entering the kingdom. And again, that was Matthew chapter 23, verse 23. Yeshua didn't need to teach his disciples rote Torah keeping or commandment keeping. Remember that his taught ones were Orthodox Jews. They had been taught Torah since they were children. So the task before Yeshua was not to simply teach Torah, but to model, to teach us, to teach them how to properly walk out Torah, such that our righteousness would exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. If we don't look to Yeshua in our keeping of Yah's instructions in righteousness, we will inevitably fail in our proper keeping of those Torah instructions. So, in closing, the keys of the kingdom that Yeshua declared he would give to his taught and sent ones was the authority to establish the halakha, that is, the ways of the faith, and the doctrines of the true faith once delivered, Jude 3. Those halakhic principles and doctrines, that is the way, the principles that determine how we are to walk out this faith, and the doctrines contained in our faith are the beatitude level walking out of Jehovah's Torah, based upon the teachings and example of Yehoshua Messiah to his taught and sent ones. Our present-day Messianic, Notzarim, Nazarene leaders are supposed to have received those same keys to the kingdom. And they have been granted the authority to distill down to us those kingdom principles and doctrines. And in order for us to enter the kingdom of Jehovah, we must meet those qualifying standards taught by Yeshua and his apostles. That's why it's so important to not only study Torah daily, but also study the apostolic writings. The apostolic writings contain the essential keys to the kingdom that each of us needs to make it into the kingdom of the heavens. And with that, we bring this installment of TMTO to a close. I hope you got something out of it, as much as I got a tremendous spiritual uplift from it, especially being down as I've been the last 2 or 3 days. So I'm going to go and post this thing, and I'm going to go and take some remedy that Hillary has made up for me to help soothe my situation, my coughing and my loss of voice and all of that stuff, and hopefully get some sleep, because I haven't been able to sleep very much. But hey, I'm whining and I'm complaining. Forgive me. I'm sorry. But keep me up in your prayers if it's not too much to ask. I would really appreciate it. And let's not forget our cousins in Israel and all of the believers in Yeshua who are in harm's way and enduring unbelievable persecution in places like the Republic of Congo and Sudan, up in Gaza, and over in Syria. Just terrible, terrible persecution. Let's hold them up in prayer, as well as hold up our leaders in Washington, that somehow their hearts may be transformed and that they will do the right thing on behalf of the people of this nation. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, and until next time, beloved, take care.